Hello, BookTube. Well, I went out and about today, as I mentioned in my other video. Books were not the focus. The places where we tended to go today did not sing for books. They were either overpriced in one place that we went to. There's kind of a communal, sort of half antique mart, half item consignment shop. That's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. It's 3 stories full of just a conjurer's warehouse of stuff that you just it would need a whole day just to list the stuff that's there. Old mechanical typewriters, old bottles, old rotary phones, a whole gigantic fish aquarium full of old buttons for political campaigns that are long gone, for political candidates that are long dead, for commercials, TV shows, candy, you name it. Posters of all kinds and descriptions, and nowhere any order. So you'll wander down one aisle and you'll encounter a little consignment area of somebody's books, and then you'll wander for another 5 minutes to another place, maybe on another floor, and find more books on consignment from somebody else, and prices all over the map, all sorts of interesting things. And I've mentioned this place before in these Vermont videos, because the first time I went there, my host, Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads, was telling me, oh no, you're going to like this place. You're really going to like this place. But his description of it, before I saw it, was making me think, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. It's going to be floor after floor of egregiously overpriced junk that I don't want. And I was wrong. And I was wrong for one main reason, because tucked into one corner of one floor of this place, there's an entire corner from floor to ceiling of back issues of comic books. And I saw those. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. They aren't in any particular kind of order. And I saw them. My first reaction, since I'm still clinging to being right about not enjoying the place, my first reaction was, well, that's all just going to be junk. It's going to be single issues from the last 2 years. It's not going to interest me at all. And then my eyes caught the Legion of Superheroes logo. That was all it took. And as you've seen, I don't know, maybe we might be able to link, I might be able to find those videos and just make a playlist of them so you can see. But the thing you would see in the sequence of those videos is that the first time I found a bunch of old issues of the Legion of Superheroes. Not really old, because the people who do these consignment things might not know anything about comic books, but they would know that something that's 35 or 40 years old is valuable enough to set in a case. They don't want to put it in just a rack with a whole bunch of other comics. These were instead, I want to say 25 years old. They were the last run that the great artist and writer Keith Giffen did on the Legion of Superheroes. And that has not been anthologized. None of that stuff has been collected. I was dragging you through the whole saga of that. Keith Giffen had 3 different runs on the Legion of Superheroes, and the third and final one, the greatest one of all, was called the 5 Years Later saga. The Legion of Superheroes was canceled, it ended, and then Keith Giffen pitched to DC a storyline in which we rejoin the Legion 5 years later. The universe has gone to heck. It's not a sunny, optimistic place anymore. And obviously, because it's 5 years later, the team of Legion of Superheroes, one of whose hallmarks was that all of its members were teenagers, they're all adult now and embittered. They're embittered. War has come to the galaxy. And some of the home planets of some of the Legionaries have fought with each other. Their planets went to war and drafted their Legion members. All sorts of stuff like that. All sorts of real-world adult stuff like that the original writers of the Legion of Superheroes were intentionally making sure was not part of that world. And it was a grim and gritty era for comic books. This was the rise of the Punisher. This was the rise of Cable. This was the rise of characters killing villains instead of just incarcerating them. And Keith Giffen wasn't that cynical, but he thought this might be a Legion story worth telling. I, of course, rebelled against it completely. When I first heard the rumors of this thing, I thought, no, you don't change the Legion of Superheroes. But it was terrific. It was absolutely terrific. He wrote it and he drew it, and it was great. And those things have not been collected. And I always used to sing their praises to you. and finally, about, I think it was a year ago, there was finally a listing for a hardcover omnibus edition of the 5 Years Later saga, just like the first 22 issues in a hardcover omnibus, the thing that all of us have dreamed about. And it was due for, I think the original date was June of 2019. And So I found some of those issues in that first trip to this antique mart, and I got them anyway just because every single issue there was $1 a piece. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, you'll have these, but for the ads and the letters page and whatnot. But you'll also have this omnibus when it comes out. And the next time I went to the comic shop and checked on that omnibus, its publication date had been pushed forward to June of 2080. In other words, right around the time when the Legion itself could buy the book. I don't mean to disillusion you. I don't want to alarm anyone, book 2, but I'm not sure that I'm going to be here in 2080. So it looks like that anthology might have hit a snag. I have no idea what that could be, but it looks like it might have hit a snag. I have a suspicion of what that snag was, and I think it has 3 names. I think the first one is Brian, the second one is Michael, and the third one is Bendis. This Brian Michael Bendis has been given the reins of control over a new launch of the Legion of Superheroes, and it's radically different than anything that's happened before. And Brian Michael Bendis he's a big name in comics, he's a marquee figure, but he's also a hack and extremely derivative. And I'd be willing to bet, if he is as much of a prima donna as I've heard, I'd be willing to bet that he went to DC and said, look, I don't want you setting up a side-by-side comparison of one of the most beloved Legion incarnations of all. And sorry about that, book 2. There was some sort of power glitch there. I have a suspicion that I know what that power glitch was. And I think its first name was Brian, and its middle name was Michael, and its third name was Bendis. His reach is long. The minute I mentioned a bag of cocaine, the power went off. Anyway, I was actually in the middle of an almost endless Grandpa Simpson style type story about how we wore our onions on our belt because it was the style at the time. That's what I was trying to say. I was pulled into that comic book corner of this antique mart and got a ton of Legion issues, which I showed you. And then time passed, and the wounds here at the little farmhouse healed, and eventually there was enough wine flowing for them to lose all judgment and invite us back. And I came back, and we went back to that antique shop, and those comics had not been touched. No one had cleared them out. And I went and re-harvested. I harvested all the Legion issues that I had not harvested the first time. And I went back. We were back today. And I was thinking, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is there any chance that there are any Legion issues left here? It's not completely organized. I might have missed some. So we went back, and I could tell right away I've had an endless amount of experience at fast fingering along the tops of comics racked in boxes and rows. That's what we used to do in comic shops. Comic shops almost don't exist anymore. But once upon a time, you had the new releases at the front of the store, and then the back of the store was just box after box after box of old issues. And you got really good at firing through those, otherwise you'd be at it all day. And I could tell right away that I had harvested all of the Legion issues, and that no one had been there since. So I was thinking, well, okay, I guess you could kind of sort of look through these issues for some other run that you really like. But how much time would it take even to find that, much less to then go hunting for it? And just as I was saying that, I spotted one issue from a run I don't own. It hasn't been collected, and I love it. It was Fate. So I dug through those racks, and I found a whole bunch of those issues. These are from the late 90s and the early 2000s. And it's the Fantastic Four. One of the last great incarnations of the Fantastic Four before writers started mucking around with the fundamentals. It's not your place to muck around with the fundamentals. I don't care if you are Brian Michael Bendis, and I don't care if you're right when you say that when the Legion of Superheroes, for instance, was introduced in the 1950s, comic books didn't have any black characters. I don't care if you're right about that. These characters were made in one way. There are no meaningful black characters in Dickens. What are you going to do? Take a paintbrush to Dickens? Retrofit, retcon Dickens? No, you're not. These aren't your characters. These aren't your properties. If you want, very rightly, to redress that balance, introduce new characters and make them popular. Make them catch on with your readers. But don't... Anyway, that is now an absolute raging fire throughout all of comics and throughout all of comics movies. Keep in mind, I'm talking about a run on the Fantastic Four now. If you search your memory, you will remember for about 5 minutes, about a few years ago, there was a Fantastic Four movie in theaters. It was a massive flop. A massive flop. And why was it a massive flop? Because it mucked around with the fundamentals. That's why. And one of the ways it mucked around with fundamentals is the very way I'm talking about. It race swapped a character. Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, is not black. And you are not a racist to point that out. But in that movie, the studio executive said, no, we can't have a superhero movie with a 4-person central cast, all of whom are white. No, we can't do that. So make one of them black. Spin a roulette wheel if you have to, but we don't care. Make one of them black. I would argue that that is a far more insulting approach than making an ordinary Fantastic Four movie and just letting black fans enjoy it. but one way or another, Johnny Storm was viewed as the character to go, the one that would make, I guess, the most sense. And the actor who was cast to play him was the most talented person in the movie, and went on to play Eric Killmonger in Black Panther. So, I don't think he'll be going back to playing Johnny Storm. Of course, in the movie version before that, lightning struck the same way again, because the actor who played Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, in the first versions of the Fantastic Four movies, went on to play Captain America. So in both cases, that role was actually a lucky thing for both of its actors. But that happened with the Fantastic Four after this run. After this run, all bets were off. You couldn't really tell what was going to happen, who was going to die, who was going to be evil. And the person who's responsible for this run is Chris Claremont, who will be famous to you comic book fans because he is the guy who took over the all-new, all-different X-Men and made it great. Made it one of the best-selling superhero comic books in comic book history. He's the one who these characters were created by other people before he got on board. But when he got on board the book, he gave us the definitive characterizations of Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Professor X, especially Wolverine. He gave us the definitive characterizations of those characters and ran that for a while, and then left the X-Men, couldn't really find comfort anywhere else, came back to a version of the X-Men. But in the course of that whole process, he decided to try his hand at writing the Fantastic Four. And I thought he did a fantastic job. And the reason why it seems a little surprising for me to say that is because I'm in the comic book minority in not ever liking Chris Claremont's writing. He's clearly a frustrated novelist who never learned how to write comic books, so his characters speak in page-devouring blocks of exposition. And he only knows how to write 2 characters. He's written hundreds of them, and he only knows how to do 2. His characters are either Hey Bub, rough and tumble, Bronx-style Wolverine or The Thing characters who cut off the G's from the end of their words and have sorts of homespun wisdom, or they are hyper-cerebral, over-articulate exposition dumpers. And when they are that second kind, he doesn't care if they're children. He doesn't care if they're falling out of a building. He doesn't. They all sound exactly the same. So you would think I wouldn't like it, but I loved his run on the Fantastic Four. Now, I want to show you the issues. I can just run through them here while I natter. I'm gonna admit that a big reason why I love the run here, I do like the writing, but a big reason why I like the run is because the artwork chores were split between 2 of the greatest comic book artists today, Pascal Ferry and especially Salvador Larroca, who does a Fantastic Four that doesn't seem anything like any other rendition. And these issues are full. One of the things that made Salvador Larroca a perfect match as an artist for Chris Claremont is that Larroca is fond of giving you the normal 9-panel page and breaking that up on a regular basis, not once an issue, but multiple times an issue, with a big, gorgeous still panel. What used to be referred to when it was the first page of a comic book as a splash page, where I bet any one of these issues will have what I'm talking about, where he will have the normal crowded page, but he's fond of this. He's fond of doing 1-panel things, and for every big reveal, that was an eyeless, but for every big reveal like that, there's a page where a character is just sitting there, thinking, reflecting, and that is a perfect match with the way Claremont writes comics. He likes to write comics that way, where a character is just going through, in words, every single permutation of what is going on in their life right now. And when Claremont does that sort of thing, he's actually fairly good about it. The only thing that really annoys me about it is when he tries to do it in a standard issue action comic book. It absolutely does not fit in a standard issue action comic book. But these are, one of the things that I really love about this run is that all the characters are mature. These are not This is not the standard Fantastic Four conception where an alien fleet or an insane android breaks through the wall of a building and they're all, what on earth is going on? This is a version of the Fantastic Four that has seen it all and done it all and reacts that way. Believably reacts that way. So I was happy to find all these, and there's another thing that made me happy about these issues. I found about 15 of them. The woman at the counter I was getting the hairy eyeball from her the whole time. There are two, the whole time I've been going to this place, there have been two women at the counter. I always get the unfriendly one. There's a friendly one who waves her arms and smiles at people, and then there's an unfriendly one who is openly judging everything that you buy. And she was looking at me and looking at the fact that I was buying superhero comics, and she wasn't pleased with that. I disappointed her, and I'm going to have to live with that. But one of the things that made me happy about finding this whole run is something you would think would have disappointed me, which is that these issues are barely 2 or 3 in a row. And the reason that made me happy is because it means there'll be other issues of this run. It's the Legion all over again. There'll be other issues in those racks. I just didn't find them. Which means that if my hosts should have another lapse in judgment and invite us back, or if they end up missing Frida, they might end up missing Frida and inviting her back. I come along with her. There's no getting Frida without getting me. If that happens again and we go back to this place, well, then I have my work cut out for me, because this is exactly what happened with the Legion. I found a nice stack of Fantastic Four issues that have not been collected. As far as I know, there's no anthology that goes this late in Fantastic Four continuity. And I'm going to have a blast rereading these things. And for $1 a piece, why wouldn't I? And if I'm right, then those same comic books will be in that same corner next time. Again, no one will have touched them. And I will just be able to harvest all the rest of them and fill in this run. That would be wonderful. And I also want to show you one more thing that I found at this place: a shoulder bag. I've done my share of shoulder bag tours on this channel, but not lately. And the reason it's not lately is because I've had this one. I've had this cloth shoulder bag for, I don't even know, well over a year. Longer than I usually have a shoulder bag. It's square on the bottom. It fits an enormous number of books. It has an outside slot. It has inside slots that are extremely accessible for a subway pass and my hall pass at the newspaper. And also, another feature that I really like in my shoulder bags is that it's rock solid attached to this thing. This is the weak spot of any shoulder bag, is that this is either going to work its way loose from the bag, or it's going to work its way loose from this metal loop that it's on. I don't like it when either one of those things happen, and this thing is so rock solid that that's not going to happen. And so I was content. And because I was content with that shoulder bag, a shoulder bag was not on the enormous list that I mentioned. And yet, at this antique lot, I found an old bike messenger style bag that I really, really like. It has every bit as many pockets or more, and I just like the look of it. I think I like the look of it more than I like the bag I came up here with. So that was the other thing that I bought at this antique mart. And then when I was done paying, the woman started to bag my stuff, and I said, no, as you can see, one of my purchases is bagged, so I'll just put everything in that bag. And she looked at me like she wished that it were in her power to say, "You'll take the bag I give you." She knew at the last minute, she realized she couldn't say that to not only a paying customer, but someone who was taller than she is, older than she is. So she didn't, but she wanted to. So as much as I have usually extremely high marks for Vermont hospitality, it's got at least one person on the team who's letting the side down. But that was a lot of fun, and that was the other thing that I wanted to show you today, kind of a comic book adjacent video, because I found a handful of books and a stack of comics that are going to be a delight to reread. These are the thing. I might think that he's wordy. I might think that he's unrealistic. I might think that he's not a particularly good dramatizer of emotion. But the one thing I can say about Chris Claremont is something that every X-Men fan would agree with, which is that he is unbelievably rereadable. It's because he's so wordy. You can reread his issues forever and not get tired of them. A thing that cannot be said about even more famous comic book writers. I'm not going to name any names of the recently deceased, but it's not something you can say about everybody, but you can say it about Claremont. I've read this run, and I know that I'll be happy to read it again. So that's it. That's 2 videos today, book 2, really 3, because I don't know that we're going to be able to salvage earlier. This might be a 3rd video. It's part 2 of this comic book thing. And who knows what tomorrow will bring. Time moves differently here in Vermont as it does in Lothlorien. Well, there are other things. It's a bustling family house with children and cats and sunlight and all sorts of fun errands. It's not one lonely old coot in his book room thinking, well, what kind of video can I make today making fun of Lukash or David Murphy? It's not that. I'm actually engaged in normal, healthy socializing. It's so gross. But anyway, I'll try to make some videos tomorrow. And who knows? If the wine gets flowing here in the little farmhouse, there may be another monster video tonight. I thought it was a dare. I thought it was a dare to wait until Mark and I were slightly liquored and then just turn the camera on and let us wool gather about history and sailing the North Sea in a storm or comic books or Star Trek. And people are watching that video. People are commenting on that video. And their comments show they're watching it all the way to the end. I don't know what's wrong with you people. That might happen again. You never know. But anyway, I will try to make at least a couple of videos tomorrow. And, well, okay, this is another example of what I'm talking about. I have no idea what day of the week today is. But sooner or later, this has got to be either Friday or Saturday, which means that we are coming up on our read-along. We can't let that down. I have to do those on Sundays. So that's at least 2 videos coming up whenever, depending on what day it is. We've got the first 150 pages of Children of Dune and the first 5 chapters of The Power That Preserves. So I definitely won't be missing those. I don't know how we'll do it, but we'll figure it out. But I'm going to wrap this up for now and get back to enjoying myself. But I'll see you soon. Thank you.